Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to show us how to create a sorting functionality on a table using Vanilla JavaScript. Now, the data we'll be using to create this sort functionality is coming from the CoinRanking REST API. I've used this API so many times on this YouTube channel. So quickly to show you a sample of what we can do with this sorting functionality, as you can see, each from this table there are several headers. You have the price, the name, the tier, rank. All of them have these sorting functionalities. So if I click on, let's say, the name, you can see I'm able to sort from ascending order to descending order. If I click on it again, it sorts it from descending order to ascending order. That also applies to the price. So if I click on the price, you can see the one with the most price is on top. If I click on it again, it sorts from the least price to the most price. Same thing with the symbol. So this sorting functionality works for all the headers on this data table. And before we get started with this tutorial, I want to show you a note-taking application I used in organizing everything I did for this tutorial, which is called Era. And as you can see, it supports markdown functionality. All the texts I created are written in markdown format. You can see that it's a note-taking application which allows technical writing to be possible. So if you probably like taking notes using markdown functionalities, this is the note-taking app for you, and it supports all platforms. If I scroll down, you see that you can download for Mac, for Windows, for Linux, and they give an option to download a demo so you can test it out. So you can feel free to do that, and I think it's also affordable as well. You have a lifetime subscription of 1990 USD, which I think is fair for a lifetime support. And I think the developers are also committed to improving this app, because when you look at the roadmap, they intend to also provide additional functionalities which you can keep track of right here on the roadmap page. I would also like to mention before we get started that this tutorial is not sponsored by Era, but rather they gave me a lifetime subscription, which I'm really grateful to the Era team for. So thank you very much, Era. And with that, let's get started. So right now, as you can see, I already created a folder in my terminal. So I can just open up this folder in Visual Studio Code. So I can just type in code and dots. So this open up a brand new Visual Studio Code for us, and here we can create all the files we need. We're going to need 3 files: the JavaScript file, the HTML file, as well as the CSS file. So quickly, I'm going to create it right here. So the first one is going to be, let's start with the index.html. So I have the index.html file created. Then next we can create the style.css, and then finally the app.js file. So now that these 3 files have been created, now I need to start by creating a boilerplate for the index.html. So I'm going to use emmet to create that by typing in the exclamation mark, and with this we can see it creates a starter boilerplate for us. So I'm going to close this welcome tab, and the next step to do is to connect the CSS as well as the JavaScript to this HTML document. So to do that, let's start with connecting the CSS. So right above the title tag, I can just type in link, and within the link I can say rel is equals to style sheets, and then the link to our CSS file. So that will be href, which is style.css. So with this, our CSS is linked to our HTML. Then we need to link our JavaScript file as well. So quickly, under this body tag, I'm going to open a script tag, and then within the script tag, I'm going to create the attributes called src, which allows us to link the app.js file right here. So with this, we now have a JavaScript file and a CSS file connected to the application. So one more thing I want to do is to integrate Bootstrap 5 by making use of the Bootstrap 5 CDN link. So I'm just going to search for Bootstrap 5 right here in the browser, and then click on the link provided for us right here. So all I need is the CSS link. We don't need a JavaScript link. So I'm just going to grab the CSS CDN link, and right in the head section, I'm just going to paste in the CSS CDN link of Bootstrap 5. And I think with that, we should be able to proceed with the design of the application. But before I do that, I need to make a configuration in this style.css file. This is just the only thing we'll do in this file. We need to style the body of the css of the entire page rather. So I'm just gonna open the body tag, and I'm gonna give the background a color of beige, and then I'm gonna give it margin of 0 and a padding of 0 as well. So that's all we need to do in the css. So I'm going to close the css tab. The next thing I want to do is to create the navbar. So currently we are designing the table, that is the page where we want to make the table to show. So we're going to make a navbar. We're going to make use of a table as well. So I'm going to use Bootstrap 5 navbar to do this. So I'm just going to search for navbar in the search box right here, and it's going to give us a list of different designs of navbars. So I just need something very simple and easy to configure. So I'm just going to go for the one we have right here. So I'm just going to grab everything there, and I'm going to copy it, add to the body, and then I'm going to paste in the nav, and then I'm going to edit this text right here. I can just call it crypto dashboard. Okay, I didn't spell the board correctly. So I'm gonna save, and let's see how this looks on the page. And to load this up on the browser, I'm gonna make use of Live Server. So Live Server is a plugin you can install inside of Visual Studio Code to help you preview the design of your project when you work with Vanilla JavaScript. So as you can see, this is the navbar we have right here. It's white because the color we gave it is background of light. If we want it to be dark, we can just do bg dark, which is also a Bootstrap class. As you can see, the navbar is dark, but it doesn't allow the text to show. That means if we want to use the dark background, we need to change the text to white. But rather, I think I'll stick with the light background, and we have this right here. So the next thing is the table. So I'm going to head to Bootstrap 5 again, and I'm going to search for table, and we get a list of different tables. So I think I'm just gonna go with a simple design, and we can configure it from there. So let me scroll down, and I'm gonna go with this particular style called table bordered, and I'm gonna copy this, and we can just configure it in our Visual Studio Code. So right under the nav tag, I'm gonna paste in that table, and all we have is just the table tag. We still need to put in the th tag, the tr tag, and the th tag. So just a little bit of configuration is needed. So this table already has a class of table bordered, and I think I'm fine with that. And within this, I'm gonna clear this dot right here, and I'm gonna have a tiered, and within the tiered, I'm gonna have a tr tag, and still within the tr tag, I'm gonna have a th tag. This is where we have our table headers, and the first text we have right here is going to be uuid, and I'm gonna duplicate this 6 times. So right under the UUID text, I'm going to have BTC price. I'm going to say BTC price, and next up we're going to have rank. All this data will be gotten from the REST API, but currently what we are doing is just to create the headers or the heading right here. So we have the name next, then we have the price, and finally we have the symbol. So I'm gonna change this as symbol. Cool. So we're done with the table head, which is going to help us create our sorting functionality. So after the table head, we want to need the table body. This is where the data is going to be, and right now I'm not gonna impute anything right there. So I'm just gonna save and see what we have on the page. As you can see, we have all the headings all set. We have the UUID, the BTC price, the rank, tier, name, price, and symbol. So now the next step is we need to assign the right attributes to all the tables. So for instance, for us to be able to manipulate this table, we need to assign an ID to it. So the ID I'm gonna give this table is called crypto table, because we are dealing with data coming from a cryptocurrency platform. So let me just say crypto table, and then let me see. Next up, we can just add the data attribute. So this is gonna be data dash whatever we want to call it. What this data dash signifies is it's like a attribute that stores custom data private to the page or application. So what do I mean by this? With this data hyphen, we're able to manipulate the headings of this table however we want. So that's what the functionality of the data hyphen does. So anything after the hyphen can be anything you want to name it. You can name it anything. But for me, I'm gonna name it sort map. So you can just see this data hyphen as a hook if you're familiar with React. So I'm gonna call it data just sort map. So because I'm sorting all the headings in the table, so all the th tags are gonna have this attribute. So I'm gonna assign it to all the headings and then I save. So one more attribute I want to add is the id attribute for our t body tag. This is where the data is going to be assigned, so we need an attribute for that. So I'm going to give it an id and I'm going to call it data. So with this, we're going to be able to manipulate the table however way we want it inside of the JavaScript file. So that's what we'll do next. So now within the app.js file, the first thing we need to do is to construct the API we are going to use to display data on the table. So we are making use of the CoinRanking API. So I'm going to create 3 variables right now. So the first variable is going to be called the base URL, which I'm going to copy from the CoinRanking dashboard very soon. The next one is the proxy URL, which helps us to avoid any form of course error. And finally, we have the API key, which doesn't for now. I don't think it does much, but I'm just going to include it. And I'm going to copy it from the CoinRanking dashboard. So quickly, let's head to the CoinRanking website, which is coinranking.com. So I'm going to click on that and we're going to head straight to documentation, which is I think at the bottom of the page. So we have it right here, API documentation, and I'm already logged in. So if you don't have an account, make sure you create an account, and I'm going to head to my dashboard first before I proceed. And I'm going to copy the API key. So that's just pretty straightforward. So if you create a new account, you get an API key and you can just paste it right here, which I've just done. And the next thing is the base URL, which I'm going to go back to the API documentation. And the API we need, the base URL for the API we need is to be able to get all coins. So I'm going to click on these coins on the sidebar, the coins we have right there. So we need to get all the coins. So the base URL to do that is api.coinranking.com /v2 /coins. So I'm just going to grab that. This allows us to get all the coins from CoinRanking. So I'm going to paste that right here. And finally, the proxy URL, which I said helps us to avoid any form of course error. So I'm just going to type this out. It's from https://course-anywhere.herokuapp.com. So this proxy URL helps us avoid any form of course error, which is fantastic. So now I'm going to join all the APIs together. So I'm going to say var API URL is equals to, so I'm going to make use of backticks and I'm going to join the API keys together. So we just need the proxy URL and the base URL. I'm not going to include the API key right here. So in fact, I don't think we need the API key. So I'm actually going to get rid of it. So I'm going to get rid of the API key. We don't need it. The proxy URL allows us to avoid course error already. So probably if you are building this using Node.js or any form of backend programming language, you might need to make use of the API key, but for this project I don't think it's needed. So to make sure this API key is working properly, I'm just going to console log it in the browser. So I'm just going to say console.log API URL and then I'm going to save, and let's open up the console. So I'm going to click on inspect and click on console. As you can see, we have the API URL properly constructed. You have courseanywhere.com and then you have the API ranking right there. So with this, we're able to access the CoinRanking API without any form of issues. So next up, I want us to display the data from CoinRanking in the console. So to do that, we're going to create an asynchronous function. So quickly, I'm going to say async function, and then I'm going to call this function, I didn't spell the function properly. I'm going to call this function initialize table. So I'm going to say initialize table, and I'm going to make a parenthesis right here, and we have a bracket. So within this bracket, I'm going to create a comment that says get all coins. And below that, I'm going to create a variable called response. So I'm going to say const response is equals to await. So we're making use of a sync await, fetch, and then we're going to call the API URL we constructed above. So API URL. And next up, we're going to create another variable called coins. So I'm going to say const coins is equals to await, because it's going to return a promise. So we're going to await for that response. So we're going to call it and then make it in form of JSON. And then I'm going to create another variable, but this variable I want it to be global so that it will be accessible in every part of the application. In fact, I'm going to create all the global variables I'll need for this project. So I'm going to say var coins data. So we have coins data, which is going to be a global variable. We have a table variable, which is also a global variable we'll need. And then we have a sort column variable, which we'll use later on, which is also global, and I want it to be accessible throughout the project. And next up, I want to create another variable called sort ascending. So I'm gonna say sort ascending, that sorts ASC, and I'm gonna set it to false at first. So these are all the global variables I need, and the first one I'm gonna use right here is called coins data. So I'm just gonna say coins data, which as you can see we created right on line 6, and I'm gonna assign it to coins dot data dot coins. So I'm gonna console log coins data right here and see if we have the data in the console. So let's save, and so for us to call it, we need to create an event listener. If you don't know what an event listener in JavaScript, an event listener is a way in which you can wait for user interaction like a click or key press events and then run some code whenever that actions happens. So for us, I'm gonna make use of the DOM content loaded arguments in the add event listener. So quickly let me type this out so I explain further. So I'm going to say document dot add event listener. So I'm going to type within the brackets the DOM content loaded, which is going to be the first argument, and then the second argument is going to be the name of the function we want to initialize. So I'm going to paste that right here, and then finally I'm going to set the last argument to false. So that's all we need to do. So what this means is, with the DOM content loaded arguments, anytime we save the file, the events fires off when the initial document has been loaded. That is, anything within this add event listener fires off once the page has been saved and the page loads in the browser. So let me save, and then let's see if we're able to see any changes in the console. As you can see, it's initialize table function gets fired, but it seems to have an issue right here. It tried to access the CoinRanking API, but there was a 403 forbidden error. So if you get this error message, what you need to do is just to click on this link, and then it might open up the network for you. So just grab this URL, request URL, copy the request URL, open a tab in the browser, and then paste it right in, and you'll be asked to request temporary access to the demo server. So you need to click on this. So once you click on this, then you don't need to do anything else. The data will be made available to you for a while. So I'm going to click request temporary access, and I'm going to head back to the browser where we have our project, and I'm going to refresh the page. So let me refresh the page, and as you can see, the data is now available. We have 50 data in the console, all available to us. So that's all you need to do to make that error disappear. And as you can see, we have all the data we need, like the rank, the name, the symbol, the UUID, and the like. So everything is made available here, which is cool. And with that, we can now move on with the project. So ideally, the next step should be how we can display the data in the console on our table so that it becomes visible to the end user. So ideally, the next step to do is to create a function that renders the table. So I'm going to create a comment right here, and I'm going to say render table. So this is a table that allows us to display all the data from CoinRanking on the table, which we created using Bootstrap. So I'm going to create a function called render table, and within this function we are going to do some DOM manipulation. But first, I'm going to create a variable to check if the data exists or not. And to do that, I'm going to create an if statement that says if coins data, because that's the variable that holds the data, which is a global variable and it's now available throughout the project. So I'm going to say if coins data dot length is greater than 0. That is, if we have data available, then we're gonna create a variable called crypto coin. So I'm gonna say crypto coin, which I'm gonna use later within this function. So once that is confirmed, then we need to manipulate the HTML we have in our index.html file. So quickly, I'm just gonna say coins data. We're gonna try to look through the coins data. So coins data dot for each, and I'm gonna make use of the coin variable. So what we're saying basically is saying if coins data exists, then we say coins data dot for each coin, and I'm gonna make use of the fat arrow, and I'm gonna open a bracket, and then we can now say crypto coin, which is the variable we created above. So I'm gonna say crypto coin. I didn't spell it correctly. So crypto coin, then we're gonna make use of the plus sign. So plus equals to, then I'm gonna create a tr tag. So I'm going to have a tr tag. This has to have a closing and an opening tag. That's the tr tag. We need to close it off. So that will be done later on, but we need to assign each td tag, which will create next, to each data. So what do I mean by this? I'm going to say crypto coin, and then I'm going to make use of the plus and equals to sign. And as you can see, I made use of backtick, and I said the table data for the first one is coin.uid. So all this data is available for us right here. So what we're trying to do is to get the data and then input it inside a td tag. So as you can see, we have the UUID right here. So that's what we're trying to get, and we've assigned that to the first td tag, but I think there are about 7 in number, so I'm gonna duplicate this about 6 more times. So the next one is going to be the BTC price. So BTC price, and then next one is gonna be the rank, then next one is the tier, then we have the name. For the price, is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to make use of the math.round method. So I'm going to say math.round because the figure is a large one. So I'm going to say coin.price. So, and finally we have the coin.symbol. So that's all we need to do. And finally, we need to close off the tr tag. It's just like we're trying to create a table in HTML. So it's pretty much straightforward. So I'm just going to say coin, crypto coin plus equals to then /tr tag. This is where the for loop ends. So I'm going to create a comment right here that says for loop ends. So you're aware of that, and we need to make use of the get element by id and then set it equals to the crypto coin. So how do we do this? I'm going to make use of document.get element by id, and the element we're trying to get is called data. If you go back to the index.html, you can see right below here where we are trying to display the table data, that is the td tag, which we have right here. The id we gave this t body is data, so that's why we are calling it right here. So we make use of the get element by id to do that. So I'm going to say .inner html, so that helps us to put it inside the html of that particular attribute and then call the crypto coin. And when we save, that means it's going to show within this table body when we save. So let's check the browser, but before we do that, we need to call this function as well, because remember we created a function called render table. So we need to render it when the page loads. This initialize table is like a lifecycle hook. If you are familiar with Angular, you have the ng on in this lifecycle hook that renders when the page loads, and if you are familiar with React, you have the use effect hook that also does something like that. So all we need to do is to call that render table function within this function. So right below the data that we have right here, I'm just gonna call the initialize the render table function, and right above it, let's create a comment that says initialize table, so that you know that that function helps us to initialize the table. So I'm gonna go back to the page, and as you can see, all the data are now on the table, as you can see right here. So the final thing we are going to do is to create the function to sort the data. That is when you click on the headers on the table, then it sorts the data from ascending to descending order, which is the major purpose of this tutorial. So I'm going to create a function called sort, and then I'm going to give it an argument of e, and then I'm going to open a bracket. So the first thing we need to do straight up is to create a variable. So I'm going to call this variable let this sort, is equals to, then what we want to do is to grab the attribute we have right here, that is the sort map attribute, which is like a read-only property that allows us to enable read-write access. It allows read-write access to be possible to this table headers. That is, when you click it, you're able to access the table headers and make it functional. So that's what that function does. So for us to be able to access it, we need to make use of the e.target.dataset.sortMap. So that's all we need to do for us to be able to access that particular attribute. Next up, we need to create a condition that allows us to enable the toggle effect possible on the table headers. So quickly, I'm just going to create a variable that says if sort column, which is a variable we created above, is equals to this sort, which is a variable we created within this function, and then we need to enable the toggle effects to be possible. So I'm just going to say sort ASC is equals to not sort ASC. If you scroll up, you can see the sort ASC variable we are accessing, which is a global variable, is set to false initially. So anytime you now click on it, it turns to true. If you click on it again, then it turns to false. Like, it allows the toggle effects to take place when you click on the table header. So that's what that does. So the next thing we need to do is to set the sort column to this dot sort. So I'm just gonna say sort column is equals to this sort, not this dot sort rather, but it's this sort. And then we'll need to make use of the sort method in JavaScript to enable the sorting to be possible. So to do this, I'm just going to call the coins data, which is the data that contains all the values on the table. So I'm just going to say coins data.sort, which is a JavaScript method like I mentioned earlier. I'm going to give it two variables, that is A and B, because we're trying to sort. So I'm going to create a fat arrow, and then we have a bracket. So within the brackets, we're going to create two conditions that allows the table to be sorted in ascending and descending order anytime the table header are clicked. Like, when you click on it the first time, it sorts the table in ascending order. When you click on it the second time, it sorts it in the descending order. So the conditions to do that is we need to create a if statement that says if A, and then we make use of the bracket notation, and then we say sort column is less than B, and then we also make use of the bracket notation, and then we make use of the sort column, then return sort ASC and set it to -1, or else set it to 1. So that's the first condition. So the second condition is going to be the opposite of that. That is, if the A value in the sort column, which is supposed to be closed right here, we need to close it off right here. If it's less than B, that is, if B is greater than the first column we have right here, that is the first time we click on it, then render the data in descending order. That's what that basically does. And then we can now finally return 0 to end the operation. So for this to now finally work, we need to call the render table function, because without that, anytime we click on the table header, the data would not be accessible. So we need to render the table. So that's all the sort function does. And we still need to do one more thing within the initialize table function, which is like our lifecycle hook. So what we need to do is to implement sorting when the table is clicked, that is when the header is clicked. So quickly below the render table, and I'm going to create a comment that says implement sorting when clicked. So we need to make use of the when clicking on the table header. So I'm going to make use of the query selector at first. So I'm going to say document dot query selector all. So we are trying to select the table, the crypto table, that is the ID we set in the crypto table, which is right here. This particular ID, which allows us to access the entire table. So we need to select that by making use of query selector all. And then we need to also call the table head as well as the table row and then the table head we have right here. And then we need to look through them actually. So we're going to make use of for each. And then I'm going to make use of the fat arrow, but first we create a variable called element and then call the fat arrow, and then within the brackets we have right here. So I'm going to add an event listener to the element. So I'm going to say element dot add event listener, and then we need to make use of the click event, because anytime the table is clicked, that's when we want to sort the table. So we make use of click event, and then we call the sort function because we already created the function to sort. So this function, we need to call it right within this event handler, and then we set it to false. At first, we don't want it to start taking effect when the page loads. That's all we need to do, and I think the sorting should work. We've done, I think, all the major functionalities. So let me save and check the browser and see if the sorting works. So I'm going to click on the headers, and the sorting doesn't work for some reason. Let me open up the console. Probably have an error in the console. I'm gonna open up the console. The console is error free, in fact, but the sorting doesn't work for some reason. So I'm gonna check and see if there's any mistake somewhere around there. Everything looks good to me. Probably let me check the HTML. Oh yeah, I just noticed right within the th tag, the data dash sort map attributes needs to have a value assigned to it, and this value needs to be exactly what's in this table data, that is the UUID, the BTC price. It has to be exactly the same thing for it to work. So I'm just going to grab this UUID and then I'm going to assign it to the UUID I have right here. So the one for the price, which is this BTC price, I'm going to copy that as well, and I'm going to assign that to it as well. So the sort map for the rank, I think rank is correct, rank. Same with tier, so I'm just going to say equals to tier, and then same thing with name, and then the price, same thing as price, and the symbol, I think the symbol is also spelled the same way. So I'm just gonna write is equals to symbol. I think that's all we need to do. So I'm gonna save, and I believe the sorting functionality should work this time around. Let me close the console, and if I start with probably the symbol, you can see it's able to sort the data, and if you want to sort the name, it sorts it in a descending order, and same thing with the rank, is able to sort it in an ascending and descending order. So the sorting functionality works properly, and with that, I think we've come to the end of this tutorial. If you have any questions, please drop it in the comment section. I'll be sure to answer you. And with that, I'm gonna say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.